welcome to another episode of the Rooted In podcast. Today we are absolutely filled to the brim, perhaps overflowing, maybe, with art. We wanted to kick off season 2 with kind of a little more fun topic, I guess. A little more expressive and kind of a way that seems more obviously expressive, colorful, exciting. So our whole goal of today is talking about how to be rooted in art, how to connect your language arts to art to your language arts, whatever order you want to put that in, I guess. The whole point is that connection. So I figured we'll talk a whole lot about that today. I'm Claire. I'm joined by Tracy today.
Hi, everyone.
And we can just jump right in, I guess. So where do you want to start?
Well, let's talk about what art is to begin with. What defines art? Defines art? People struggle with this.
You struggle with saying it.
Right. So. we could go on for a long time. What is art? And the truth is, for most of us, you know it when you see it.
True.
And that is part of the definition. If you think it's art for you. But for our purposes today, in talking about adding art into your language arts, I think that what art is anything that purposefully expresses what you want to say. It's in some artistic fashion.
Right. Which once again, you're already adding like a loose extra addition.
Right. Well, you can express what you want to say with writing, which is of course an art form.
Yeah, that's true.
We're talking about a visual art form, like
Gotcha.
drawing or painting or sculpting or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I guess that what goes along with that in defining then what art is, you start to define what an artist is.
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess would be continuing with that, extending to the person who then creates something intentionally, right? Or is it?
Right.
Or
Yes.
Intending to express something through whatever that artistic medium might be.
Right. And right away, where you start to get snagged when you're talking about everybody being able to add art into language,
Mm-hmm.
people get concerned immediately. But I'm not good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a good artist. I can't draw. I can't whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really irrelevant to our purposes for
Right.
trying to increase the depth and reach of your language arts by folding art into that. You don't need to be a good artist. You need to be intentional. You need to work more solidly on expressing yourself.
Yeah.
For expressing what it is you want to say.
Right. And obviously there are ways that if you practice what is considered art, you practice drawing, you practice painting, you practice whatever that might be, you are going to, in theory, become better at expressing something.
Sure.
But, like you said, it's not a prerequisite, right? This isn't art school. You're not learning precisely how to render something in pencil or how to create a sculpture. It's not about that, but it is about the active application of thought and a way in which that then manifests, which just happens to be.
There's a phrase I love.
Art.
Art creates a focused learning opportunity.
Nice.
I'm going to draw this picture for some purposes, and we'll talk in a little bit about what some of those purposes might be. And just doing that creates a focused learning opportunity.
Which I feel like we should probably kind of talk about what that phrase all by itself means. That focused obviously being contained to whatever it is you're working on. And, when you have kids or work with kids, it's really immediately obvious that focus isn't always high on the list of things. And you're like, yeah, let's stay focused. I don't know how many times that phrase might come out of my mouth, but if you give a child something to work on where they enjoy it too, and it's kind of an added extra bonus, but something where there might be some level of instruction, some level of goal or outcome that can help them stay focused, to be really keyed in on what they're actively doing in that moment.
Right. We kind of moved into, why bother? Why should I do this? And what you're saying is exactly what we try to do with all kinds of things in Rooted in Language, and that is art creates a product.
Right.
There's something you're producing through this learning that you're trying to do.
Right.
And every every time you create a product, it's a focusing element to what you're doing. And when we say create a product, we're not talking about you're taking popsicle sticks and building a ship.
Which is, although that is very fun to do.
But I mean, it doesn't have to be a big
it's not
deal.
like a capital P product, right? It's not this huge,
right.
big event.
Writing a paragraph is a product that
right.
you've created. Drawing a character representation is a product you've created. So the purpose, the value of creating a product, and that's what you were getting at, is I liken it to, as an adult, if you've ever walked into a meeting where there isn't an agenda.
It's like my worst nightmare.
Right. you may get a few things done, and you might accomplish something, you might not, but you're going to flounder around. Right. You're going to take more time. You're going to waste a lot of time. Afterwards, you might not even be able to say, so what was your meeting about?
Don't really know.
But if you've got a nice pinpointed agenda, your odds of actually achieving something are much higher.
True.
So that creating
focus.
A product is kind of like having an agenda to your meeting. Now you've got a focused learning opportunity.
I feel like probably at this point we should say, though, that isn't to say that every single time you're doing art, or even every single time you're doing art that might be connected to some kind of learning, that doesn't mean everything is carefully regimented,
right,
or has a very explicit set of instructions.
Well, sometimes it can just be for fun.
Right, yeah, because sometimes the whole goal, sometimes your agenda is to just entertain yourself or to entertain other people, and so I feel like there's a risk of, if you're like, I must have a goal, I must have a focused learning opportunity, I must have this agenda, you can get stuck on, this whole we want them to be able to be free and express everything that they might want to express with the crayon and paper, and they're just going crazy with all kinds of colors. So it's kind of, sometimes you're more on that end of stuff, sometimes you're more on it is a little more hyper in that we do have a list of instructions that we're following very carefully. But I guess more what we're talking about here is kind of a big overview, looking at how this works across, or being applied to any of that on that spectrum of, or the scale rather, from really, really focused, really, really intense connections and art and rules, and no rules or no laws about what you're doing. And that anywhere along that bridge, we can have kind of what we're talking about here, this application of that, and why it's useful at any point along that system.
Right. For one reason, another reason, I should say, why art is useful in your language arts program is that it automatically creates a multi-sensory learning opportunity. So, in addition to being a focused one, it's also multi-sensory.
So many learning opportunities.
Exactly. So
it's like there's a reason we do this.
Yeah. So anytime you can tap into multiple areas of the brain, you stand to touch something in a student, that maybe trips a deeper understanding of what you're doing. You also tend to relieve boredom.
Yes.
Particularly in things that require a lot of repetition.
Yeah, and I want to come back to that. I think that, or just talk about it now.
I
guess. Yeah, we don't have to come back to it. Here we are. With the kinds of students that we typically see, they have a lot of reading and writing struggle, which means that they might be doing more repetition in an area
and need to be
doing more repetition in an area than maybe a typical reader or writer might require in that same area, and it can be really hard after a while of you as the teacher or the parent know, my kid needs to keep practicing their handwriting through learning cursive, and they're not loving it, but we figured out that this is the best thing for us to do at this moment, and it's kind of a swimming laps situation, and it's really boring.
Right, you're building muscle.
Yeah.
You want to become a competitive swimmer. You want to be able to be in the water where people who can really swim. You're going to have to swim laps.
Right.
And it's boring.
It happens all over the place, no matter what angle you're coming from, or or what you're trying to learn at some point, and actually it's true across the board, any type of learner, any age, at some point, if you're trying to learn something, you'll reach that swimming lap stage of, now it's time, I just have to buckle down and do the same thing over and over and over and over again, ad nauseum, until it's truly ingrained. It's automatic. But if you've ever experienced something I feel like learning music is one that comes up a lot as a good example of the playing your scales and doing your etudes book and your I have bad memories of etudes books.
It's the finger exercises.
And after a while you're like, well, why can't I just sit down and play Chopin? And why can't I play some fun music?
I don't know, Claire. Why can't you just sit down and play Chopin?
But I want to. So part of adding art to the language side of learning, not the music side of learning, but helps break up that you are still practicing, you are still running over these same skills, you're running over spelling skills, you're running over just sort of, what's the word I want? Stamina in writing skills. If you could only write one sentence, how do we work to build you up to be able to write an entire paper? I mean, those are hugely different.
Let's take a moment here to say, you may be confused if you're listening to this, okay, now you're talking about writing, but we were talking about art. Where's that intersection?
So that's where I was headed,
Yeah,
so that would be the place of, if you're working on those, practicing those moments over and over again that are these writing or reading practices, adding art into that can help break up some of the monotony, but still give you the opportunity to practice. So you can make stuff a little different, and it can become more interesting or more exciting again, just because it's different.
Another value of adding art.
Right. Yeah, I was trying kind of getting back to that. It can break up that boredom idea just by throwing some spice in a new way.
And we offer a product. We call it Explore a Story. That's available on Amazon, or it's available as a download on our website. And it walks you through how to draw a character, any character. It can be the main character, it can be the bad guy, it can be a side character that particularly interests the student reading a story. So you draw that character, and then it walks you through some evaluation to help both your drawing and add elements into your drawing, and eventually and you're doing bits and pieces of writing in this journal while you're drawing and creating this character.
You're right.
And it secretly gets you to analyze.
It's sneaky.
It's very sneaky. Gets you to analyze your character, and eventually, through this drawing and the various things you add to it, you come to theme.
Right.
So you start to understand the theme of your story all through what initially seems like might even be a stick figure drawing of a character.
Right.
And you've done bits and pieces of writing along the way, which is a very powerful tool.
Right. And that's all that multi-sensory approach really coming through there, where we attacked the story analytically from a writing perspective, and then we attacked the story analytically from a drawing perspective. And whether or not either of those feel analytical is up for debate, and kind of depends on the student, it depends on the conversation you've built up around it. But either way, you're approaching it from these two different avenues, and the result is richer for having done both. That one can stand alone. You can certainly analyze something strictly through writing about it and talking about it, or just writing about it. You can strictly analyze something just by doing a bunch of drawings about it.
And let's pause there for a moment to say that when you go to do a drawing, even if it's at the stick figure level, which is perfectly acceptable, you need to be there. There's this thing that goes on in people's heads when they pick up a pencil and start to draw. And this is true of people who perceive that they cannot draw a straight line, as people like to say, though that's notoriously difficult to do. And people who actually consider themselves to be artists might have this same problem, and that is the inner critic.
Right.
So the entire time you're drawing, you're going, oh, this face doesn't look anything like how I wanted it to look. Oh, I can't draw hands. I hate hands. Oh, these legs are too long. They're too long. What do I do about that?
No, this is a bad conversation, because I'm getting flashbacks. I mean, this is my day to day.
But part of your job in folding some of this art into your language arts is to defeat that inner critic. Turn it off. You don't need it. It's not doing a darn thing for you. Has nothing to do with how well you're expressing an idea.
Right.
Not how well you're doing your drawing, but how well your drawing is expressing your inner idea, which in this case is about who is my character.
Right.
You know, so you need to replace that inner critic dialogue with things like, what kind of mood is my character usually in? Oh, my character's angry at the world. Huh. So their face is going to look angry. So even if I'm drawing a round circle that represents my head, I can do straight lines for the mouth and the eyebrows, and two little dots for the eyes. I don't even have to put a nose on there. And I can represent angry.
Right.
And that's one of the things Explore Story provides
so I want to put a
that.
pin in the sort of stick figure representation idea.
Yeah, right.
But going back to the inner critic conversation, I think that, we could spend hours just talking about the idea of an inner critic.
Right.
And you can dedicate a lot of time to that.
Particularly about conquering it.
Oh my gosh.
But replacing that vocabulary, that I can't do this sucks kind of thing, with, okay, what do I want to focus on? Where's my positives here?
Right. Which, I don't want people to listen and think that, okay, we have one conversation and then it's magically better. First of all, I don't think anyone would think that. If you've ever listened or heard your inner critic yelling at you, you know that sitting down and going, okay, I'm going to replace your negativity with some positive pick-me-up comments. You know it doesn't happen overnight. But what can start to happen in building some of these habits that you're building by adding art into what you're doing is art tends to bring the critic to the forefront, which is one of its major flaws. One of art's big setbacks is it brings your critic front and center for whatever reason. So you can start to build this habit of, the more I am opening myself to having that be true, to having the critic appear, the more I can actively fight some of the negativity that's coming out of it. And ultimately, it's now you're talking about building life skills, which is cool.
Yes.
Which is a neat extension, and we might go into this a little bit more later, of adding art, is that some of the life skills that really can come out of this connection. But this is a huge one, that at no point in your life will you be criticism free. That's just not a thing.
Right.
And we can get more into this if we want, or it can be its own thing.
We can let that go.
But criticism has a purpose.
Right.
It exists for a reason, but the real neat aspects of critiquing and of really thinking about what you're doing or what other people are doing is the growth that can come out of it. It's not being told that you did something that sucks. That's not a cool part. That's the worst part. But really reaching something and growing from an experience you're having by thinking a lot about it, by having practiced having real productive dialogue with your own inner critic, by going, you know what? My inner critic says that these hands are bad looking because I can't draw hands, but like you were saying, okay, let's talk about what I did do right, what I do like about it, how I can improve.
If my hands have failed, what went right with what I did?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I have my character holding a book, because my character is a serious reader, so they wouldn't be caught dead out in the world without a book in their hand.
Right.
Now look at the analysis you've just done about that character. And so this is a positive about your drawing, because after all, as we started with this whole thing, this is not about, gosh, I'm suddenly going to be in the Louvre next week because I'm working on my art skills. This is about, I'm working on my analytical skills, and I'm doing it through studying character in a new way.
Right. Yeah. So with that whole idea in mind of replacing, or at least switching the order that inner critic dialogue is happening, of going, you know what, before I get to really laying into myself about what a poor job I just did, excuse me, I'm going to first say, these are the things I did right. This is the benefits of what I did, and this is how I can improve on this in the future, which is a much more productive conversation.
Absolutely.
Than going, golly gee, I'm terrible. Like that, that does not help anybody, least of all you. So it's really building yourself up and building your own confidence in having those kinds of conversations is a huge part of putting art into anything you do. I mean, forget language
Right.
arts, put it everywhere.
Yeah. Art.
Art and math, art and science, art and language arts.
Okay, let's talk a minute about how we think and how kids think. And I'm talking about two major differences in the way our brains perceive the world around us. So some of us are naturally concrete thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
We see what's in front of us, we evaluate what's in front of us,
Not me.
Some of us are naturally abstract thinkers.
That would
where,
be the side I sit on.
Yeah, everything is more
Metaphor
Yeah.
and interpretation, and often very not literal.
Right, these are the people who
Kind of
tend
gooey.
to come up with the very odd ideas out of nowhere seemingly, because their brain doesn't follow a linear path. It pings and pongs all over the place.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things, I love this distinction between abstract and concrete, and I like that you're thinking about it in terms of how people think, because I frequently talk about it in how things look or how we interpret something, like something is either abstract or concrete, but it's not a one over the other situation.
No. It's not to say one is better than the other.
Fascinating,
Right.
and they're both hugely beneficial.
What it is to say is that there are benefits to be gained from both.
Yes.
And if you always live in one camp, it's helpful to explore the other camp, to push yourself again into that which is different.
Will be hard is a good thing to say at the very beginning, that if you're a naturally concrete thinker, analyzing, accessing, thinking on the abstract side is going to be difficult. And if you are naturally abstract, I have this problem because I am an abstract thinker. Math in particular is very, very difficult for me because math favors linear thinking.
Right.
Not to say I can't do math, and sometimes I do really well and other times I don't, but I tend to think in a very kind of curly Q roller coaster way.
Pinball.
A little pinball-ish, yeah, sometimes. I definitely have a path, but because of, and I'm talking kind of not the super crazy high math stuff, but like algebra type stuff, it definitely favors here's step one, here's step two. Here's my first idea, second idea, third idea, conclusion, and then we're done. You tend to do better thinking or running along that track, and because I'm not naturally inclined that way, it's not an area that comes easily for me.
Right.
So I have to work a lot harder to access that side.
Right. So the opposite tends to be true with a lot of kids. They tend to be concrete thinkers. And they have very deep amount of difficulty stepping into the world of abstract thought, which is all well and good up to a point until you get to analysis. Evaluating something beneath its surface. Thinking of something metaphorically, not just relaying back, okay, what's this story about? Well, I'll tell you the plot. Yeah, but what's it about?
Capital A, about.
Right. What was the author trying to say?
Right.
Why is it worth reading? These are things that, you might get a lot of blank stares when you ask those kinds of questions.
Yeah.
And this is an area wherein art can really begin to break down some of those walls.
Yeah, and not to say I do have difficulty analyzing things too sometimes, because let's be honest, it's hard.
Well, that's another thing you have to practice.
Right, but some of my students who are very concrete thinkers and don't naturally understand metaphor or interpretation or kind of, I don't know.
Thinking outside the box, thinking of something in a new way.
Or explaining something in a that figurative language. That's what I was going for. That kind of artsy, what we tend to think of that artsy language. Poetical.
Yeah, that's right. People say it. I like it. It flows.
It flows. Poetical things, where you're not drawing straight conclusions of this thing equals this thing. You're sort of just laying something out and leaving it up to the reader to really dig beneath what is going on. And if you're not armed to go through that process, or if you don't have the tools to approach that, you're going to find nothing.
And how do you acquire those tools?
Right.
Well, art to the rescue.
Mm-hmm.
So
in both ways, it both helps you find tools and it can be the tool.
Right. Yes. So one of the things, let's talk a little more explicitly here for a minute.
Right. We're being very abstract.
Yeah, we are. So one of the things I love to do with kids is just kind of a basic color exercise to explore more abstract thought.
Mm-hmm.
So have your student pick a color, maybe their favorite, maybe just a basic color. So green. Then you start to push them into, okay, what do you think of when you think of green? Things that are green.
Perfect. Let's go with that.
Okay, all right.
It's a great place to start.
What things are green? Trees.
Trees are green.
Grass.
Grass
Grass
is
is green. Okay, so maybe just like, what's a bigger word for that?
Right.
Maybe they'll get to the
Nature,
woods, maybe they'll get to nature, maybe outside, whatever. Push them every time. So then talk about, like, can you think of any expressions that people use that has the word green in it?
To be fair, this is a complicated question because if you're not familiar with a lot of idioms or expressions, you're not necessarily going to pull these out.
Yeah, this may or may not go somewhere, but
sometimes we've done this, and this reminds me of if you happen to be talking about idioms or talking about expressions, or you just heard one. This is great. It's a different way to segue into it rather than just start with the color.
Right.
Instead, start with the idiom that you might be talking about.
For instance, she was green with envy.
Right.
Oh, well, what do we think? Why would he say that?
Right.
So, or she ate a bad shrimp and within a half an hour her whole face turned green.
Right, which is an interesting one because that's a great case that you will probably encounter a lot. Things like that where it's a description and it is on one level a very straightforward.
It's very concrete on one level. Yeah, her face turned green.
It's kind of greenish.
What does that mean? What do they say with
that
one phrase? What do you now know?
Right.
So there you are, digging beneath the surface. And you're doing it, in this whole color exercise. Okay, her face is green. What do you think if you saw someone with a green face? Now, a human being, it could mean they're from, Mars.
Yeah, who knows?
Alien. That's a good color for aliens. Yeah. That's another thing I might think
little
of.
Green guys.
Little green
guys.
Yeah. But if somebody said, my sister's face turned green, what would you think was going on with your sister?
Well, now some of my students would tell me that their sister was an alien, but but yeah. So here you can start to see that you're having this great, really rich conversation around art, because color being this piece of art, and you haven't necessarily actually done any art, which is kind of cool. Where this is a brief side note, but how art can be a part of things without you having to get out the paints and the brushes and
but you could start this whole color exercise with handing them. Oh, okay, you chose green. Let's open the box of 64 crayons. Which green are you thinking?
The big green one.
Make a big green square. Let's make a square on this piece of paper.
Yeah.
All right. What might be that color? So, you can launch it with something like that.
Yeah, true.
As well.
Yeah. But you can see that there's a lot of avenues for bridging between art and language arts and really building this strong thing, because where they can go from here is once you've talked about the fact that, okay, maybe green represents nature and growing and maybe new life, right? We get spring green as a very, this burgeoning sort of color. I just really like the word burgeoning.
It was good.
It was good. But you can also get, envy is this color of jealousy, and it's an aggressive color at the same time. It means sickness. It can mean things aren't right. They're not quite how they should be. You can also get greed, with this maybe.
Yeah, maybe if you have an older student, they might realize, money is green.
Yeah.
Well, American money.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I had a student I was doing this with who lives in Canada, and Canadian dollars are not green. And I was briefly thrown off because I was getting to this whole greed concept, and it was a great conversation, and then all of a sudden she went, money isn't that color. Never mind. But
anyway.
But culture does dictate a lot of these color associations.
Yeah, well, culture actually dictates almost everything when you get into the abstract. And you really do have to help your kids provide context around whatever your exercise is.
Yeah, that's true. Context is the huge part. If you just said green without then leading into that conversation, it's almost purposeless. I mean, you really need that conversation, that context around it, because then you can take this whole drawing, color, painting, whatever exercise, the conversation that happened, and then start applying it back into their language arts. Now when they're writing, let's say they're doing maybe like a creative writing piece, and you're trying to get them to use more figurative language, more similes, more metaphors. Well, okay, they're writing about something outside, and they now understand the concept of a green thumb. Well, they can include that in their writing now, and you can point that out to them, or they're picking a setting for something, or you're talking about the setting of a story, and it's happening in the spring. Well, you just had this great conversation all about the color green and how springtime might represent this new green.
And a way to deepen that conversation, if you get lucky and they say, oh, green makes me think of spring.
Yeah.
Okay, how does spring make you feel?
Yes. So then you can go that even one more step, or if you're reading a book wherein spring is happening, well, why did the author choose that, and how does that then get into your feelings about what's happening in the story? It's new life, it's out with the old, in with the new kind of idea.
Things are blooming.
Right.
Things are warming up.
And you can
and you can also have the contrasting conversation of what do you think you'd feel if this same scene happened in the winter?
Exactly. Yes. So that's where you can start building these contrasting conversations which can really be helpful if your initial conversation of, well, why did it happen in the spring? It results in blank stares and, which is a fair response. But if you start adding these contrasts of, well, okay, we talked all about these colors and different seasons and different associations that are then within that, let's throw it in. What if it were in the heat of summer? What if it were in fall? What if it were in winter? What if everything was blues and grays and dark, ugly browns and just barren and kind of like it's a completely different setting. That's analysis. There it is.
Right, and all from exploring the concept of color.
Right.
Which you'd be surprised how many stories you can read where you can pull some color references out of it and maybe explore those.
Color is everywhere. I always tell my students when we're reading that authors do everything on purpose. There's nothing accidental when you're reading, except for the occasional typo, which we can forgive them for. But there's a reason that they referred to this, or described this room as being green. There's a reason that the young girl who just showed up is wearing a yellow dress. There's a reason that these little details are brought up, and you as the reader, your job is to find them and start picking them apart and deciding why those decisions were made.
Mm-hmm.
You decide.
And if you choose to do some character analysis through drawing that we were talking about earlier, you might deepen that character drawing through the addition of color.
Yeah.
So what colors would you choose for your character to wear, and why? Right. Let's not just choose pink because it's your favorite color. We're drawing a character.
What would their favorite color be?
What would they wear? Oh, my character likes to hide in the woods, so my character's going to wear browns and greens.
Right.
Why? Oh, because.
And then here you have this entire character breakdown of all these details, things that you might access through just writing or just conversation, but here you can have
it's going to be a lot more focused.
This avenue, right? That focused learning opportunity coming in again. Okay, so we talked about a couple different things, right? And a great, or the color exercise is a fantastic avenue. I don't know if you had any other kind of quick exercises that would be good to throw out there.
A couple things come to mind. One is this is a product that actually Claire created that's on our website that we call Letters To. That is a great exercise, again, in that sort of from the concrete to the abstract, moving your kids along that spectrum, getting them to understand the difference. So it starts with a letter writing activity and moves to a graphic storytelling aspect.
Yeah. So there's writing and drawing going on together.
And it's a little bit guided, but not, there's no heavy rules to it. But there is some structure so that, they can get started, and there's some samples and things like that. The whole point of it is it moves kids through that whole spectrum of beginning to be starting with a concrete thought and moving into an abstract expression of that.
Yeah. And that back and forth and pairing too. Because sometimes you can talk about an area or a specific thing, and you can talk about it both concretely and abstractly. And so being able to bounce back and forth and know which one you're currently doing, and through that you can kind of figure out how you think naturally, which is cool, to then kind of just understand about yourself. It's all that growing as a person, which is always a good thing.
Yeah. And we do have another one that popped into my head too. In our book, Trees in the Forest, one of the chapters is about, or includes an activity we call phrase trees, which is about, it kind of creates a close reading opportunity for students, where if you're reading a text, and it can be at any level of complexity, as long as you can read. So anything from a first grade level on through high school and
college,
beyond.
what do you want?
Yeah.
Never ending.
So you pick a passage that you like, say just a random paragraph, and then within that you start to tease out those sentences that really speak to you, and let yourself be poetic about that if you want to. Poetical. So that
the speak to you thing, just real quick. Sometimes I think we can get wrapped up in we have to find the quote unquote really important moments. But I think speaking to you is a good way of putting it. But sometimes it's just, I just really like this sentence.
I like this language.
Yeah, I might not be old enough or have a good enough grasp of expressing why I like something, but I can tell you that I do. And in this, for that activity in particular, that's all that you need.
Right, it is all that you need.
Knowing that you
Although,
like it.
that said, another thing that happens with that activity is people of all ages tend to gravitate to the sentences that really give you something.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, then that opens up a conversation of why do you like it, obviously. I mean, yes, go have that conversation. But
so
sometimes
it could be because it's beautiful
with
language, which is worthy of celebrating in and of itself, and it could be because this is a turning point in the story, and I feel it. I feel it in my gut.
It's big, yeah.
So you pull out some sentences, and then you create a picture with those sentences. So you're literally putting the words on the page any way you want that helps
big
deepen.
Writing, little writing,
right?
Color. Yeah.
We both say. So somebody, if you feel this needs to be shouted, suddenly your words get bigger as you write
They're all
that
capital
line.
letters
and
or something.
or you're expressing someone's desire to pull into themselves. So that's what your words do.
And they curve all around the page, which is a cool note that you're not drawing in the sort of traditional definition of the word drawing, but writing artistically with drawing with words, I guess, is a form of drawing.
Letting the words be visually expressive as well as verbally.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So it is drawing in this kind of unusual way, which is a really neat way.
Yeah, and
of
we have some great examples in the book. And most of them are student examples, and really some amazing efforts that kids come up with.
Surprising, these kids, some of these students that you would not expect to get very loose and open with this stuff, and I think they really like that.
Yes, and especially after they've done a couple of them, or they've, had a chance to see a couple of other people's, and they get into it more and more.
Right. So a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, well, I guess everything we've talked about, kind of fits under the big umbrella term of creativity.
Yes.
Right? This is all super, what I think most people would define as creative stuff.
Yeah.
We haven't actually said the word creativity.
No, we haven't, which is interesting because that's probably one of the first words you think of when you think of art.
Art and writing and drawing.
You have to be creative.
Which is actually, I'm glad that we haven't said it at
Yes.
all, because I think there can sometimes be a little bit of a stigma around
It can become a barrier to
like,
actually
I'm not a
trying
creative
things.
person.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, well, first of all, that's bunk, but
Yeah.
like everybody's creative in some way, shape, or form.
And people like being creative
Yes.
in whatever
Yeah.
way it calls to them. It appeals to something internal.
It's very human. Yeah,
Yes,
that's what.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's a need that even people who are not naturally inclined toward
Artistic.
drawing or toward
Right.
something like that, or toward expressive language, somewhere, somehow, there's something creative that appeals to them, whether it's viewing it or experiencing it or creating it.
Right.
But anytime you bring this up, and this kind of goes back to this critic conversation a little bit, of there are enemies of creativity,
Oh, sure.
which is a really dramatic sentence, and I love it just for that. It's a very dramatic way of the enemies of creativity, like blah blah blah. But they are good things to be aware of, so that moving forward, trying to pull art into what you're doing, looking for avenues to do that.
And opportunity.
And opportunities
Yeah.
that you don't get snagged, or these pitfalls that can come up. And one of the biggest ones, and I think it's probably the one that snags us the most,
Mhm.
is time.
Right.
Which we all know, time is
It's
terrible.
the enemy of everything.
Yes. But it speaks to the fact that you have to be intentional about wanting to do this kind of thing. That if you go, oh, yeah, putting art in my language arts, that sounds neat. I'll try that. It's not going to happen.
Right. It needs to be a deliberate choice. You need to schedule it.
Right.
You need to know that, okay, the next time we're reading a book, we're going
We're
to
gonna do
evaluate
this.
a character
Yeah.
in this way.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that every time something spontaneous comes up, you go, no, that wasn't planned. Don't put the pencil down. Like, that's not that. Because we love spontaneity so much, especially spontaneous art. But you do have to intentionally be open to it and looking for ways to bring it in, because we talked about a few here, and we have a lot of stuff that we try to give to you guys that help with that. But I mean, they're everywhere. There are opportunities everywhere, and the goal for us is to give you confidence and flexibility to see them and pull them in. So the more intentional you are about your time in being open to that, the more it's going to actually happen.
Right. And then there's the whole...
Slayed that enemy.
Yes. Done. Then there's the whole lack of confidence thing, which can take a lot of different forms. You can have a fear that you're going to be criticized.
Right. Both internally or externally.
Right. And that will keep you from ever picking up a pencil.
I think that is one that comes up with a lot of students that I've seen, where it's they do actually like art. They like to draw. They like to sing. They like to whatever.
Oh, there have been all kinds of studies done about the fact that, up to a certain age, kids are so free.
Yeah.
They're so willing. You give them a crayon, they're going to scribble all over a piece of paper with it, and they're going to enjoy every moment of that. And then at some point, they're looking over at Johnny there, and Johnny's drawing a great-looking person, and I can't draw a person like that.
Yeah.
And then they sink into that, sometimes never to be climbed out of pit.
Which is awful.
Yeah.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So and I think the big sword against that enemy, right, is that, like we were saying, the inner critic conversation.
Replace your inner critic. Work on it. Recognize it for what it is. Shut it down. Replace it. The way you shut it down is by replacing it with more productive internal dialogue.
That's easy to say if not easy. It's easy to say, but it's easier to say as an adult, as someone who might recognize it. But for a kid, that's really tough. So one of the ways you can kind of help them start to do that is by you doing it externally to them, where you're saying, okay, I recognize how you feel about your drawing. Here's what I think of your drawing. And it's not, being positive and being complimentary is a good thing, but it's not just complimentary.
It's not false compliments.
Right.
It's, look what you did. You didn't think that you could draw a character at all. And yet I can see when I look at this that this character is happy.
Right. So it's finding specifics,
that's
right?
Interesting. Yeah.
Those very specific
I can also see
compliments.
this character is carrying a spear. Ooh, what's that about? Whatever. You focus on very specific things that the student has done well in expressing some aspect of that character.
Right.
And that of course, is the dialogue you want to help them develop. Is how do I express more things about my character? Not the fact that, wow, these hands don't look like hands.
Right.
Who cares? You draw a circle for a hand. Who cares? What you care is what's in the hand. What's it doing?
Right. Which is, if you're helping them with that external dialogue, the theory being, of course, that eventually their internal dialogue is starting to reflect that as well.
Right.
Slayed that one too. Done. Kind of the fourth one, or fourth, I can't count. The third would be procrastination, which is a huge problem everywhere with all things all the time.
Right.
That we put things off. It goes back to the time idea that being active, being intentional in wanting to do this kind of stuff, in really pursuing it, that will keep you on top of it and will keep you going. So, just the great procrastination beast we all know about.
Right.
Don't even let it in the door.
Or shoo it back out.
Or something.
And then that leads us to perfectionism, which is kind of plays back again to these same ideas of, well, I can't do it perfectly, I'm not going to do it at all.
Right.
Or I start to do a drawing, but I spend more time erasing than I actually do putting lines on the paper. Which brings up an
interesting point that with writing, I feel like we build up a lot of, you have to edit your writing. You know that you wrote one thing and it was good, and now we're going to write something different or something new or something better, being the theory, or the hope, I guess. So we recognize in writing that that's a very common activity. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, in drawing, we get hung up on I spent hours working on this. I spent a ton of time dedicated to doing this, and it is not right. Right. And I'm very upset by that.
Yeah, I don't like it. What do I do about that? Well, one thing is throw away, start over.
True.
Another thing is, if you're really talking about art to be on display, whatever, you have to be willing to do that.
It's true. That is true.
But if you're so hung up on every single stroke that you make, every single thing that you put on paper has to be perfect, you're never going to get there.
Which is where we have to start equating it back to writing with that same bits and pieces of writing, bits and pieces of drawing.
Sure.
And there is no real judgment going on here. Right. This is you writing for your sake. This is you drawing for your sake.
This is you attempting to express something.
Right.
And you're doing it with a pencil in your hand in either case.
Yeah, it's true. So kind of that I feel like is a perfectionism. It definitely links to that inner critic idea, but it sneaks up on you in a lot of ways and is an ongoing battle. Mm-hmm. Not to end on kind of a...
No, actually what I wanted to do for our listeners is talk about the fact that we've mentioned some of these things. We do have things out there to help you. If you've not attempted to roll some art into your language arts, you might be going, okay, but I'm really not sure what to do. So we did mention some things that would give you a little bit of guidance. One is our book, Trees in the Forest, Growing Readers and Writers Through Deep Comprehension. There are a couple of art activities in that book to help with growing comprehension. And then there's Explore Story, which is a separate little book that is kind of a journal for drawing and writing and character development.
Yeah, kids particularly like that one because you can follow it through your whole school year of reading, or years of reading.
Right. You can
have a neat progression.
Yes.
Like filling out a diary almost, but it's kind of this diary of what I've read and by analyzing. It's an analysis diary.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the Letters To product that's on our website. And there's also, we did some little, very brief stick figure videos. They're free. They're on our YouTube channel that talk about, okay, I can't draw. But I want to draw a character. I should be drawing a character. So it talks about this idea of stick figures and how stick figures can actually be really expressive.
Yeah.
So it
much
walks
more than
you
people
through.
give them credit for.
Yeah, it's 3 or 4 videos, and it walks you through kind of just a basic stick figure, how to add to it, how to kind of flesh it out a little bit, make it a little more. And it's actually me teaching Rita, who always is saying, I can't draw.
I love it. It's the self-proclaimed artist teaching the self-proclaimed un-artist, I guess, which is fabulous.
Right, and she makes incredible progress in the course of about 15 minutes.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, actually.
So watch those.
And her attitude has totally changed, which is totally, that's awesome. She's much more It's what we were talking about.
Well, this was kind of fun.
Yeah, her internal dialogue has shifted.
Yes.
I mean, because of that, which is really neat.
Yeah. So take a look at those things if you're of a mind, and good luck. Hopefully you'll take some of this to heart and try some art.
That's right. Hey, that rhymed. I love it. All right, thank you everybody for listening so much. Be sure to follow us, give us a like, give us a comment on whatever forum you might be listening or watching. We really appreciate the time you've given to us, and we hope that we have given you guys some great stuff to take home, take into your school, take wherever you want it, I guess. And a big thank you for that.
Bye, everyone.
As a thank you for listening to the Rooted In podcast, use the promo code SEASON2 on our website for 15% off. That's the promo code SEASON2, SEASON, the number 2, for 15% off at rootedinlanguage.com.